It's a pleasure to be here representing CDRI, a coalition of 54 countries and 12 international organizations, including the government of Brazil. And it's especially pleasing to be here as just a couple of weeks ago, the government of Brazil took up the position of co-chair of CDRI, which it will hold for the next 2 years, a clear indication of its commitment to our shared ambition of a future with disaster-resilient infrastructure for everyone. Thank you very much for your question. I've got 3 broad points, if I may. The first one is at a global level, before we get down to coastal areas. You asked why DRI should become a central pillar in coastal areas. And I think the basic message I would have, and the basic message CDRI tries to bring to important forums like this, is that DRI is one of the smartest investments we can make anywhere. It saves lives, it safeguards economies, and it protects growth. If you think about it, billions of people around the world rely on interconnected infrastructure systems every day. And these are increasingly joined up, which means when one part of a system fails, the impacts cascade. And the risks around the world are rising. Today, already, 14% of global GDP growth is at risk from damage to infrastructure from extreme events. And the indirect costs across a country, across an economy, can be 7 times higher. In Brazil, $13.7 billion of infrastructure is at risk every year, more than 95% of that from flooding. Now, within this global context, there are some geographies that require special attention. And one of those is clearly coastal areas, where migration, economic opportunities, and urbanization are leading more and more people to live, work, and make their lives there. Some estimates put 40% of the global population as living in coastal areas. And as we heard in the introduction to this session, in Brazil, that's already 50%. With these people in their villages, their towns, their cities, are ports supporting trade, drainage, water supplies, telecoms, power generation, and health. Critical infrastructure systems that is supporting their lives and the local economies. And with the increasing risk of sea level rise, climate change, and tectonic activities, it's essential we act in these areas to invest and develop disaster-resilient infrastructure to protect these lives and these communities. The good news is that we're at a moment of opportunity. Most of the infrastructure that we'll use in 2050 is yet to be built. This means that if we act now, we can lock in resilience and not risk. By investing up front, we can unlock what we call a resilience dividend, money that we're not having to spend responding to emergencies, money that we're not having to spend making up for services that are interrupted or replacing infrastructure systems that have been damaged or destroyed. And alongside that opportunity, we have a chance to do things differently, to make sure that communities are engaged and consulted when we're designing and building new infrastructure systems, to draw on indigenous knowledge of what's worked in locations for generations, and to move away from the old, grey, hard infrastructure towards a more balanced approach, including nature-based solutions.
I would like to hear your position about how can we better position coastal resilience as a strategic agenda able to reduce the systemical errors and protect the economies and biodiversity and generating these long-term stabilities that's so necessary for us.
I think this is a great question and also a huge question. So I'll just focus on 2 issues, if I may. The first is helping both the public and the private sector to access data so they can understand the risks that are being faced and also the benefits of investing in resilience. And the second is in bringing people together to co-create solutions to share what's working. So in terms of the first, helping people to understand and then take risk-informed decisions, I just focus on 3 quick things. The first is at the macro level, there's a new tool called the Global Infrastructure Resilience Index, which is the world's first free-to-access publicly available probabilistic risk model, which gives at the moment at country level, but it will be downscaled, average annual loss. So it says 13.7 billion is at risk in infrastructure in Brazil every year, for example. But it can also help make investment decisions. So it tells us that targeted investment and action more broadly across Brazil could reduce that by more than 12 billion every year. Then at the project level, CDRI has recently developed and released a cost-benefit analysis tool, which can be used for very small or larger projects. It's simple. It's based on an Excel worksheet and local data. And initial tests across projects in India have shown a $5 to $12 return for each $1 invested in resilience. And the third is at the COP 2 years ago in Baku, CDRI, working with partners, released a playbook which can support the public sector to identify and manage risk across its portfolio. And then the second element, in terms of bringing people together, clearly ICS has a history of doing that really well and is doing that today. I think the government of Brazil started a lot of really interesting conversations at the COP in Belém, and it's great to see some of those being taken forwards, including in this event. And then three quick things I'll just highlight that CDRI is doing with a specific relevance to coastal communities. The first is we're providing technical assistance to cities, to small island developing states, specifically for cities around flooding, which of course is relevant, and then taking that knowledge, taking the good practice and sharing it across the coalition and beyond. The second is around bringing people together. So last year we brought experts from across the coalition together with practitioners, and they developed and launched a call to action for coastal resilience, a 10-point plan, and we launched that at the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, which was specifically focused on coastal resilience last year. We've also just launched a new community of practice on ports resilience, and I'm very glad to say that there are representatives from the government of Brazil and others on that. And the third is, with support from the government of Netherlands, we've recently developed and are now launching and scaling a new training package for officials on urban water management, all of which I think supports my first point, that investment and development of disaster resilient infrastructure in coastal areas and beyond is one of the smartest things we can do. Thank you.